announced that we will create a single construction regulator and a chief construction advisor, and will set out our detailed plans later this year. And I am accepting the recommendations to professionalise fire engineers and assessors, to licence principal contractors and to review the role of building control. Where standards are clear and industry has clarity and certainty on how individuals and firms must behave, it encourages investor confidence. And this will improve the safety of residents, support the construction industry and our mission to deliver economic growth. We have pledged to build 1.5 million homes over the Parliament to tackle our country's acute housing crisis, part of our plan for change to improve the lives of people across the country. And it is vital that these future homes, as well as existing homes, are safe and of a high quality. And I welcome how some parts of the industry have stepped up to lead the necessary change in culture and approach. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, lest we forget. Sir Martin found that just about every institution and organisation charged with keeping the tower safe and protecting those who called it home failed. His most devastating conclusion was that every single death was avoidable. The inquiry uncovered serial incompetence and negligence, complacency and inaction, and blatant dishonesty and greed. The organisations that failed included the government and regulators. The department that I now lead, which failed to act on known risks and ignored, delayed or disregarded matters affecting the safety of life. And the manufacturing companies, including Arcanic, Kingspan and Celotex, whose products were used to refurbish the tower, the report found that they acted with systemic dishonesty and they missold and they marketed them. Their disgraceful mercenary behaviour put profit before people and exploited the regulatory regime to evade accountability with fatal consequences. And to my disgust and their shame, some have shown little remorse and have refused to even help fix the building safety crisis that they did so much to create. Companies must be held to account for their role in Grenfell. The Parliamentary Secretary to the Cabinet Office is announcing today that she will use new powers under the Procurement Act to investigate Arconic, Kingspan, Saint-Aubin as owners of Celotex at the time and other organisations. And I expect swift, decisive action and will ensure progress is reported. But we must do more to make sure that the right rules are in place. To this day, critical gaps persist in how construction products are regulated. Only with rigorous reform will we transform the culture that allowed the tragedy to happen. Madam Deputy Speaker, to achieve this, we are also publishing today a Construction Products Reform Green Paper. It will help us to cut out the rot in the sector and allow competence to take root. Safety will come first and a culture of responsibility will prevail. We will celebrate those that lead the way and those that fall short will suffer the consequences. In the future, road companies will be held to account. Our Green Paper sets out our ideas for how prison time for executives who break the rules and unlimited fines where safety is put at risk. We will do whatever it takes. Across the sector, we know that there is appetite for change. That change is overdue, and we will lead it. I've paid tribute to the enduring resilience and resolve of the bereaved families and the survivors and members of the immediate community. Their campaigning has seen new legislation passed, which members of this government also supported, that has made our public realm more secure. Everyone is safer thanks to the Building Safety Act, which set new standards for construction of residential buildings in England. It introduced the building safety regulator and provisions for high-risk buildings. All people living in flats now know that the entrance doors, external walls and structure of their homes are in scope of fire risk assessments, thanks to the Fire Safety Act. There are new duties for owners and managers of buildings and blocks of flats. The Social Housing Act ensures that landlords are held to account. I have challenged the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea to demonstrate how they have changed by becoming an exemplar landlord and local authority. And I'll be keeping a close eye on their progress. And we will listen to their tenants to assess whether they have succeeded. We are pushing ahead with the remediation acceleration plan to fix all buildings around the country still with dangerous cladding, and where building owners fall short, we will act. We are introducing regulations to improve the fire safety and evacuation of disabled and vulnerable residents in high-rise and higher-risk residential buildings. Hear, hear. And as of the 1st of April, ministerial responsibilities for fire functions will move from the Home Office to my department, in line with the inquiry's recommendation that we bring responsibility for fire safety into a single government department. Madam Deputy Speaker, people and their safety are front and centre of our inquiry response. But there remains a stark and terrible reality. The bereaved and the survivors and members of the Grenfell community are still waiting for the justice they need and deserve. And justice must be done. Madam Deputy Speaker, the ongoing Metropolitan Police investigation is amongst the biggest it has ever undertaken, and the Met has the government's full support. In September, the Prime Minister rightly said that this tragedy posed questions about what social justice means in Britain today, whether the voices of working-class people, those with disabilities, those of colour are ignored and dismissed. Right. I am here to say that we will not be that country. We will be a country where decent housing, where security, where safety, where peace of mind are shared by all and not just the privilege of a few. The lessons of this inquiry should not have taken a tragedy to unearth. We will honour the memory of those who lost their lives by bringing about meaningful change in their name, change that will make life better for everyone. We are under no illusions about the scale of the task at hand. The responsibility to deliver lasting change is the privilege of leadership. This will not be done by government alone, but we will put our voice and our power in the service and the cause that the Grenfell community has continued to fight for nearly 8 long years. We will together bring about the transformational change that people of this country deserve. And Madam Deputy Speaker, it is with that admiration for their spirit and the determination to honour it that I commend this statement to the House.
I call the Shadow Minister, Kevin Hollinrade.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for advance sight of her statements and the Government's response to the Phase 2 report. Can I begin by echoing the sentiments of the Deputy Prime Minister shared across this House? The tragedy of Grenfell, which claimed 72 innocent lives, 54 adults and 18 children, will always remain a scar on our national conscience. Can I thank Sir Martin Moore-Bick and his team for their work? And can I join with the Deputy Prime Minister in offering my deepest apologies to the bereaved, the survivors and the Grenfell community for the failures that led to that horrific night in June 2017, a night where we all remember where we were. Can I also thank them for their constant and constructive campaigning? The inquiry's findings, decades of systemic failure, dishonesty and negligence, are a damning indictment of successive governments, regulators and industry. The Government's response, with its acceptance of all 58 recommendations, is a step forward, and I welcome the commitment to action. The creation of a single construction regulator, the appointment of a Chief Construction Advisor and the consolidation of fire safety functions under one department are long overdue reforms. So too is the focus on professionalising fire engineers and reforming the construction product sector, a sector the inquiry exposed as riddled with systemic dishonesty from firms like Arconic, Kingspan and Celotex. The Green Paper on construction products reform is a promising start, but it must deliver real accountability. Unlimited fines and prison sentences for rogue executives and, where appropriate, government officials cannot remain mere rhetoric. However, Madam Deputy Speaker, ambition must be matched by urgency and scrutiny. Nearly 8 years have passed since Grenfell, yet thousands still live in buildings with unsafe cladding and other fire safety defects. So can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister, although I welcome the fact she's accepted the majority of these recommendations, can I ask her why she has not accepted the inquiry's recommendation for the single regulator to oversee testing and certification of construction products, leaving this instead with conformity assessment bodies? Can I remind her that the Building Research Establishment, itself a conformity assessment body, was strongly criticised for having its own conflicts of interest? The Remediation Acceleration Plan is welcome, but its targets, assessing all buildings by July 2025 and completing works by 2027, rely heavily on developers stepping up voluntarily. What actions will she take if they do not comply? Will she work to deliver solutions for non-qualifying leaseholders and those at risk as a consequence of other fire safety defects? This House needs concrete assurances that no resident will be left behind. I question the phased approach to implementation, stretching beyond 2028. Justice delayed is justice denied, and the Grenfell community has waited long enough for change. Why must they potentially wait another parliamentary term for full delivery? What discussions has the Leader of House had with parliamentary colleagues on the establishment of Public Inquiry's Joint Committee to monitor the implementation of Public Inquiry recommendations? What is the timetable for new publicly available record on all inquiry recommendations since 2024? On social housing, the extension of AWAB's law and new standards are positive, but the government must go further to address the inquiry's wider lessons. Residents' voices were ignored. Tenant empowerment must be more than a panel or a campaign. It needs legal teeth to ensure landlords act on concerns swiftly. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, justice demands accountability. The Metropolitan Police investigation has our full support, but the pace must quicken. Those who profited from cutting corners or who were criminally negligent must face consequences, not just fines, but criminal charges where evidence allows. Grenfell must be a watershed, a legacy of safety, transparency and respect for every resident. Can I make clear our commitment to work with her and her government on a cross-party basis to meet that promise?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Shadow Secretary of State for his comments and the way in which he made them, and I hope genuinely that we can work together to continue this piece of work. I recognised in my opening statement the work of the previous government with the Building Safety Act and other measures, and we will continue to work in that vein. I hope the Honourable Member recognises some of the work we're already doing. We've brought forward a significant amount of legislation around social tenancy, around empowering tenants in the Renters' Rights Bill, around leasehold, how we can protect leaseholders, and our remediation acceleration plan. The Government will deliver these legislative changes as soon as parliamentary time allows, and the legislation commitments are detailed in the plan, and that will include creating certainty for buildings that need need remediating and who is responsible for remediating them, make obligations for assessing and completing regulation remediation clearer with severe consequences for non-compliance, and give residents greater control in situations of acute harm where landlords have neglected their responsibilities. The Shadow Secretary of State asked me about single construction regulator. We did accept that in principle, but the single regulator will deliver the functions recommended by the inquiry with 2 exceptions to avoid conflicts of interest by both setting the rules for construction products and policing its own compliance. But we will consult on the design of the regulator in the autumn.
Yeah.
I call the Chair of the Select Committee, Florence Shalami.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to start by recognising that today is yet another long, exhausting day for the loved ones of the victims of Grenfell, who are still having to fight for justice nearly 8 years on. I welcome the Secretary of State's response, and I look forward to the Select Committee scrutinising the proposals for the single construction regulator and the Green Paper. But if we're honest, Madam Deputy Speaker, what the Secretary of State has outlined won't tackle the root cause of the systematic ignorance of concerns of tenants, that toxic stigma which is at the heart of our social housing sector. Can the Secretary of State outline what steps she's taken to make sure that tenants have a voice in the social housing sector and the respect when they raise concerns for their families? Madam Deputy Speaker, we must never forget that 41% of the victims of Grenfell were disabled, a figure which underlines the collective failure of the system to protect those in need. The government's commitment to residential evacuation plans for disabled people in high-rise buildings is a welcome step forward, but I'd be grateful for some clarity from the Secretary of State on how the government intends to make residential PEEPs enforceable if the responsible person fails to identify the vulnerable resident. I'm also pleased that funding has been allocated for this in the social sector. But the reality is disabled people live in all types of housing. So can she give a commitment in her response that disabled people in the private rented sector will have the same access for an evacuation plan to those in the social sector? I'll close, Madam Deputy Speaker, by saying that none of the families in the gallery should be here today. This tragedy happened in the holy month of Ramadan in 2017. As Ramadan approaches this week, a time that should be dedicated to reflection, to healing, togetherness, too many families are still fighting for justice. No family member present today should have to spend their time demanding accountability when they should be focused on recovering on that trauma. I pay tribute to their tireless effort and pledge to continue to be a voice for them in their fight for justice without any more delay.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And as Chair of the Housing, Community and Local Committee, I know my honourable friend's commitment to the rights of social housing tenants. The social housing system, as she outlines, has not been fit for purpose, and these failings contributed to the Grenfell tragedy. We're driving up standards in social housing through stronger regulation and enforcement measures, strengthening tenants' voice and improving access to redress. These reforms will ensure landlords are held accountable for the quality of homes and services that they provide. And at the heart of the new regulatory regime is the requirement that all landlords treat tenants with fairness and respect. Social landlords are required to understand and provide information and support that recognises the diverse needs of their tenants, including those arising from protected characteristics and language barriers. And the government will lay regulations as soon as possible this year on social housing provider funding made available this year for residential PEEPs. We will direct the regulator to set standards on competency and conduct of staff to ensure that tenants are treated with respect. At the national level, we have extended the Social Housing Residents Panel, which will help ensure that tenants' voices and experiences inform policy development. We will keep a new regulatory system under review. We will evaluate its effectiveness by 2028 to ensure it's delivering the improvements we needed. And also, we will set out further measures to strengthen residents' voices in the long-term housing strategy later this year.
I call the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Gideon Amos.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Liberal Democrats stand firmly with the many bereaved and their family members, as well as the immediate community, friends, neighbours, as they mourn the 72, including children who tragically lost their lives in 2017. Any steps regarding the changes to the building will be a deeply personal matter for that community, Madam Deputy Speaker. And any decisions regarding the future of the building, I know the Secretary of State will approach with due respect for the local community, survivors and victims. We welcome, therefore, the Government's decision to work with the Grenfell Memorial Commission to design a memorial and urge the Government to approach the discussions, as I'm sure